Hello, welcome to the Honest Wargamer. I'm your host, Rob. Today we are looking at the Age of Sigmar 3 stats. Okay, some stuff to prefix. These stats are put together by Ziggy and Rob, specifically. Some other people have contributed, thank you very much, but the lion's share of the work will be done by Rob, different Rob to me, and Ziggy. So, huge congratulations to both of them. They're really the power behind this now. It's true that LLV, so shout out to him, and me, like LLV specifically and me, have done this for many years. Those guys are now the powerhouse behind this. It's definitely their project, and I'm just fronting the project. So, if you would like to thank anyone, those are the people to thank, and throw your love to. So I want to be very crystal clear that I'm just the front of house on this. I'm just the React badger. That's all I am. I would like to think I do know something about what is inside these stats. I've been doing this professionally for over 4 years. I am doing this live in front of the Twitch chat. They will be trying to help me. They do not know anything about what is inside here. They are a bunch of half-decent players, though, so it's going to be good to hear about them. So this is being filmed in front of that live Twitch audience. If you listen to this back as a podcast, or you watch this back anywhere, there will be links in the show notes so you can go and look at this yourself for free live on the Honest Wargamer. So we're all good. Good. That's a good start. Okay. So how is this data collected? It's collected from various different sources like BCP and other stuff. There's a little bit of a methodology here, I think, on the next page. Our approach. There you go. So there we go. We collect it from TTO, BCP, and a bunch of other stuff. Sometimes it's just from Excel spreadsheets. Okay. And then we've got a load of different event results. Okay. So there is 2 different splits in the data. There's Age of Sigmar 3 to 3.1, which is the winter FAQ, and then 3.1 onwards. Now, some would say it's a different season. That FAQ wasn't particularly effective. It didn't really change much in the meta. Sure, it made Nagash not usable, but also Nagash wasn't really winning tournaments, truthfully. It made Archaeon not as good, and that was a bit of an impact on the meta, specifically in some of the scary lists. But what we will have seen changed in a winter FAQ, or what we commonly see changed post a winter FAQ, or even a GHB, is generally people tend to move between armies. It's normally like a kind of like emotional jump point for people to move on to the next piece. Also, we've had 3 new books released, Stormcast Eternals and Ironjaws, being very strong armies that can do very, very well. And then we've also had the Ironjaws specifically, by the way. I know it was the Orc War Clans book, but I mean Ironjaws specifically. Or Big War, if you Dave. Those were released, and so we're going to see those as people will move on from other armies onto these new, more powerful armies, or more differently powerful armies, might be a fair way of saying it. Rob is the middle manager of these stats. Sure, that's me. Right, okay, so this is the win rate and battle plan usage stat. So we have 88 tournaments, and we've got 8,000 matches and 18,000 faction results. So 88 tournaments, and this is over the whole data set. Okay, so as you can see, Sons of Behemoth have got a 58% win rate. They're the most successful. That's with Legion of the First Prince, Daughters of Cain, Disciples of the Ancient Ceraphon, and Luminous all entering what we like to call our top tier. Yeah, so that's the little in the bottom right hand corner. This is lovely. It says our top tier is anything that's over a 55% win rate. Now, we've become accustomed to this being okay. Some people I've seen recently have said things like the meta's never been better, and I would argue that that's actually quite true. There's quite a lot of stuff in this kind of like nice bracket. However, over a 55% win rate is actually still fairly obnoxious. We've had armies that have had a 70% win rate. We've had armies with 65% win rate for more than 6 months. None of that is good for the health of a game, okay? It would be nice to see most of these fall between 45 and 55%. So it's not that these armies, Sons, Legion, Daughters of Cain, Disciples of the Seraphon, are strong, and we'll get into why they're strong and how they play later. It's that they're too strong, arguably. Similarly, underneath the 45% win rate, you've got Caradron Overlords at 44, kruleboyz at 43, Sylvaneth at 42, Nighthaunt at 41, Blades of Khorne at 40, Skaven at 40, which is nice to see them step up a little bit, He Knights of Slanesh at 39%, Beasts of Chaos at 34, Gits at 31%, and Bone Splitters at 31%. So there's a difference of 27% between Sons of Behemoth and Gloomspite Gits if you were playing. So there's a 27% win rate difference between the two, which is pretty big. Like, so there we go. So yeah, you do have a variety of different armies doing well, which is good. That's good for the health of the game. Okay, that's good. You have a variety of armies in the fat middle, so that's between 55 and 45% win rate here, yeah, which is quite nice. And you have a bunch of armies that are underperforming, and then you have some armies that are criminally underperforming. So it'd be really nice to see some updates for Skaven, Slanesh, Beast of Chaos, Gits, and Bone Splitters. Bone Splitters are a new book. So I assume points are pretty much the only way we can really help them out at this point. But it would be really nice to have those bumped up, in my opinion. But that's overall for all of Age of Sigmar. If we go on to break it into the latest versions of Age of Sigmar, so this is everything after the Winter FAQ. And are we not excluding that? Is that 10? Okay. We'll exclude the top result because I don't think that's enough. So this is only 8 tournaments. So this is a small data set. So this isn't enough. So when you do see Big War at the top, don't go tweeting it and going mental, right? That none of that is applicable, right? Compared to the next one down, because the Big War's only got a count result of 10, and the Cities of Sigmar have got a count result of 77. Okay. So this is just January. Okay. Just January, just gone. 8 results. 848 matches. This is all we've got in so far. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. We could also look at it. We'll look at it in another way at the moment. So, but in January, post this edition, Cities of Sigmar, Daughters of Cain. Cities of Sigmar doing very well, 65% win rate. I assume when we go look at those, we might see a breakdown. We'll see a lot of living cities with Stormcast allies in. Daughters of Cain still doing fine, 30 points to their list in the FAQ. Hasn't really done much. Sons of Behemoth still doing fine, 60% win rate still. What did I say? What did I say? Excellent. Love that. Slaves to Darkness, Stormcast Eternals up into a 58% win rate bracket. Idnet Deepkin into a 58% win rate bracket as well. Really nice, because I assume with the shooting that we've seen from lots of the armies in Age of Sigmar 3, a lot of those Deepkin players remembering that they're pretty good against shooting have started to put their armies on the tabletop, which is quite nice. Seraphon, 56%, and Iron Jaws in a really nice, healthy 53% win rate category, even though, and that's with a lot of results as well, 135. A lot of complaints about the Iron Jaws lists in a lot of ways, but they're actually not up there with some of the other armies, which is fun. Nice to see Magic and Nergal up into the mid-bracket. Wrath Realm Lords at 43%. Amazing. Amazing. However, a better way of looking at this, thank you, chat. It's part of a story I'm telling. A better way of looking at this is if we look at it post the Stormcast Eternals release, yeah, and the FAQ. So that's post the Stormcast Eternals book coming out, and also the Uruk Warclans book coming out. So again, thanks to the guys for giving us the opportunity to break the data down like that. Now, what's pretty select that, both that and Magickin. Okay, thank you. So that gives us, so post Stormcast book and post the Iron Jaws book, that gives us 50 tournaments to look at to give us some sort of indication. Now, you do have to remember, and something you need to remember, that the Dragons, so the Stormdrake Guard, were released a few months after the actual release of their book. And it's arguable that those are some of the stronger elements inside of the book, while Fulminators and also Long Strikes were still very applicable even early on. So the fat middle is becoming the fat bottom. I agree. So as you can see in that particular setup, Ceraphon dominated, and we talked a lot about this. Thunder Lizard do particularly well into the double damage coming out of Iron Jaws and Stormcast. So they're a nice counter meta army in lots of different ways, because any coalesced armies, are able to reduce damage down by 1. We talked about that several times on the show before. Disciples of Tzeentch up there, 58% win rate. Still a great book. It'll be interesting to see in maybe 2 months' time, when we get some more data sets in, how Disciples of Tzeentch have fared with their uptick against Pink Horrors, because they went from 215 to 250. It's pretty big. Thanks, Jamisio, for subscribing, by the way. Big love to you. Luminous Realm Lords at that 55% bracket, almost in the safe bracket there, which is quite nice. I would argue that the reason that we see them do, them maybe not doing as good in the future, is because actually you've got some pretty aggressive first-turn armies in the Iron Jaws, able to potentially threaten them pretty well. Similarly, you've also got the Dragons and also Fulminators, which can do some shooting over warden screens, which a lot of other armies couldn't, and they're also able to start off board and then move on to threaten their opponent. So it's been rare to see the Realm Lords outranged, and they're now starting to suffer that. And I assume that they're going to see their win rate drop because of that, basically. Small changes have pushed people away from the army. Yes. So Luminous completely sure. Yeah. Or screencast or Luminous have been completely crippled by a very small points update. One of those two. One of those two. You're talking about points changes on one unit. They have like 20 war scrolls. Doesn't matter. Anyway. However, who's suffering? It's always worth talking about who's suffering. Who's suffering post them. Big War at 44%, so they've started to move towards that fat middle, which is quite nice. Post the release of their book, so they're not doing terribly in that situation. kruleboyz also just underneath those two other halves of the the two other thirds of that kruleboyz book are close to the fat middle. It would be nice to see some points changes. I think you're going to have to do a lot of points changes really to help out with the bone splitters, truthfully. Kharadron Overlords and Ogre Moor Tribes at 42%, so they're suffering, but they're older books. You would assume they're getting some new battletomes sometime in the next 3 years. I'm being specific because it could be any time in the next... Well, that's not true. 2 years and 2 years and 5 months. Any time in the next 2 years and 5 months, they could get an update. Flesh Eater Courts are in that same boat, 42% win rate. Nighthaunt, we know we're getting a new book, 41% win rate, so it'll be interesting to see what happens to them as they happen. And then Blades of Khorne at 40, which is nice. Blades of Khorne have come up a little bit, Skaven up a little bit at 40 as well. That's still below where we'd like to see them, 45% up. But still not great. We'll get onto the faction specific stuff in the future. Okay. And then we got He Knights of Slaanesh down at 34%. Beasts of Chaos are beating them at 36%. Gits at 33%. And Bone Splitters are at 29%. Slaanesh being one of the most recent books. A lot of online conversations happening around some of the books that we saw released just before the launch of Age of Sigmar 3 that were written for Age of Sigmar 3. Looks like that's not true. Looks like that's not true. Okay. All right. So that's the win percentage and battle plan usage. Our battle plan usage also worth just taking a moment to note. Obviously, First Blood being played the most, Survival of the Fittest, Power Struggle, the Vice. I'm a big fan of Feral Foray. I'm glad to see that in battle plans. 10% usage. Marking Territory not used at all. Apex Predators used a little bit. I don't like Apex Predators particularly, but it's nice to see First Blood, Survival of the Fittest, and Power Struggle. I would actually say that the battle plans in Age of Sigmar are pretty weak sourced, truthfully. At the minute, it would be nice to see some versions where we see rotating deployments and then rotating deployments. You take 6 deployments, you rotate them with the battle plans in current existence. Missions don't really do much to really change the shape of. There's a lot of online conversation again about missions changing how you play certain armies, and that's true when you talk about one hero mission. But everything else is pretty much not true in my opinion. I don't think it has any particular major effect. Spoken quite a bit with local LRR player, and I think the MP comes from the fact that they play a control style in a 3-hour-long game. Yeah, maybe. I don't think people like being controlled. Okay, faction participation. All right, so let's look at it overall. This is pretty wild. The most popular faction in all of Age of Sigmar over 8 tournaments is Stormcast Eternals at 7.8%, and Soulblight Gravelords at 7.2%. Ceraphon are up there as well at 7.1%, and Sons of Behemoth at 7%. So this is all really interesting stuff, because I know that they weren't that high previously. So Stormcast meta representation recently is going to be absolutely huge. So if we just break it down, in a moment, since the Stormcast and Maggotkin of Nergal release, you'll see that Stormcast have gone up to nearly 10% of the total meta. Ironjaws at 8.2%, Ceraphon at 7.2%, Soulblight Gravelords at 7.2% as well. Sons of Behemoth and Runemeth Realmlords at 6%, Daughters of Cain and Cities of Sigmar at 5 and 4. Actually, what is the jump for Cities of Sigmar? That's actually really interesting to see how much that they've gone up by. So just give me a second to unclick this. So Cities of Sigmar 4.6 overall. Oh, we don't have. Do we have a pre this? No, I don't know if we do. I don't think we do. Okay, which is fine. Yeah, the Stormcast Eternals are by far one of the most popular armies, and this isn't a surprise. They're the Space Marines. They're the poster children of Age of Sigmar. They've got the most models. They've got the most releases. They've got some very powerful rules. They've got some very cool new models as well. And those cool new models also were very strong inside the game. So you can see why people who have collected Stormcast Eternals, normally when you get into the game, you get the start collecting box, and for 2nd edition, it was Stormcast versus Khorne. No, that's not true. It was Stormcast versus Nighthaunt, and it was Stormcast versus Khorne in the 1st edition. So everyone has got a lot of Stormcast anyway. The most popular version of Stormcast in Age of Sigmar 2 was Shootcast, which required lots of battalions to achieve, but it involved lots of long strikes, and long strikes to feature pretty heavily in lots of tournament lists going forward. Can you think of any factors why a low model count, a powerful book might have shot up in the meta representation? Sure. There's something that's really important to bring up, which Dave has brought up, is the production meta. So when a new book comes out, like the Hedonites Slanesh is a good example, while they had models that already existed, they released a whole bunch of new models. And it takes a while to get those new models on the tabletop and make them see play. As much as you might be like, how? Rob, I've seen loads of dragons. They've got them done in 2 months. It's true. I would say it probably takes as long to paint like 4 to 11 dragons as it does to take probably 11 Blissbarb archers, truthfully. But there is a production meta issue all the time with releases. And we're going to see that in the future. There are loads and loads and loads of Nighthaunt armies out there. There's loads, because of the Partworks magazine system, there are loads and loads of Nighthaunt models available out there. So people can be buying them for very cheap now. So stonks on them are through the roof. They can be buying them for very cheap, and they can be producing them now, building up to when we see the book released. Similarly, for Daughters of Cain, new Daughters of Cain book on the way, because of the roadmap. We know that. We know that most of the Daughters of Cain models are already like in people's hands. They've got Morathi. Now they might have to switch up to having more Witch Elves, which, wow, I mean, if they had them already, Witch Elves were already pretty strong anyway. They might need more Sisters of Slaughter, but it's a pretty small range. So unless Doomfire Warlocks become incredibly good, the production meta on them is going to be pretty easy as well. For Idoneth Deepkin, it's the same. People had most of the Idoneth Deepkin range because you, as of Broken Realms, you were able to build some pretty multifaceted armies. So if you wanted to not just have eel spam, you could have lots of different stuff. The Beasts of Nergal kind of meta list, or one of the Beasts of Nergal meta lists or one of the Maggotkin of Nergal lists that we see, which is a Beast of Nergal list, has taken a little bit of a while to produce because you had to go buy 12 Beasts of Nergal and paint them up and put them on the tabletop. Whereas Gotkin and Blight Kings, which is another list we saw do well at the weekend, is something that already exists in people's hands, right? Melee snakes, yeah. Everyone wants some melee snakes, they do. Okay, so if we just look at this just in Age of Sigmar 3.1, so this is just in our most 8 recent events, this is actually going to be pretty telling. Stormcast Eternals are 15% of January's results. Stormcast Eternals are 15% of the armies that played in just January's results from 8 tournaments, right? Dang, that's true. Yeah, people love loads of gold spray. Easy to produce, easy to put on the tabletop, easy to do, right? Ironjaws, 8%. Again, everyone already had all of those Ironjaws models. Everyone likes the Ironjaws. They're up there. Soulblight Gravelords still staying strong. Not surprised by that. Ceraphon at 6.2%. And then the Maggotkin of Nergal up there as the 5th most popular army. New book, new armies on the tabletop, right? So they're straight up there, super popular, right? Maggotkin of Nergal gone straight to the top. Who isn't popular? Slanesh, 0.6% of the meta. I wouldn't be surprised with a 30% win rate. And they're like the counter, like Stormcast and Slanesh are like completely opposed. They're two sides of a coin. Stormcast are easy to produce and they've got very strong rules. Hedon Knights are very difficult to produce and they've got terrible rules. Like they are like, and that is why you see that disparate disconnect between those two different factions, right? Which is pretty wild. So there you go. Like, and Gloomspite Kit's still up there, 2%. Like, look at that, 2%. Like, they're more popular than, oh, they're as popular as Sylvaneth, more popular than Khorne. Okay. And the stat to always look at, Legion of the First Prince, 1.7%, even though we know it's super strong as an army. So still people not playing it. Why is Nergal such a large range in AOS and 40k? Who on the design team loves sculpting the diseases so much? Nergal's, all of the ranges are pretty big, right? Khorne's actually really big. Like, all of the Chaos Gods have got really big ranges, I would say. Gits do have a strong fan base, you are correct. So that's meta representation. So I guess the big takeaway from this is Stormcast stonks through the roof. Will those stonks continue? The real one to look at right now, Cities of Sigmar at 4.5%. Having watched Gavin win the LVO at the weekend, we know that I think more people might put Fulminators in Living City lists, but are they going to bother to paint up 30 crossbows? I'm not sure. I think we might continue to see those Stormcast Eternals lists be very dominant for a very long time, for the next few months at least. Okay. Right, now, the faction positive win rate potential. Yeah, so the positive win rate potential is something that I've produced, or not I've produced, something I thought up, and then the stats team put together for me, which is fantastic. And it's like, it gives you a really nice indication if you're looking to purchase armies or you're looking to get into an army, right? So this is how likely, and there's another good stat that we're going to look at later, which is going to be first round losses, which is also kind of indicative of this as well. And what this does is it gives you kind of, lots of people are like, I just want to buy an army that's going to, I don't want to buy the army that's too strong. I just want to buy an army that will do okay. I want an army that will be fine, right? But I don't want to buy a crappy army. I don't want to buy an army that's too difficult, basically, right? And I think this gives, and I feel like a lot of people are in that like category of people. A lot of people want that as information so that they can understand, right? Like, if that makes sense. So this is what it is. So the positive win rate potential is the percentage that an army wins 3 or more games. So they either go 3-2, 4-1, or 5-0, right? And thank you, Miles. Just talking about the meta representation from the slide before, Miles has pointed out that Stormcast Eternals represent the same meta representation as Hedonites, Big War, Bone Splitters, Disciples, Skaven, Ossiarchs, Legion of the First Prince, Blades of Khorne, Sylvaneth, Gloomspite Gits, Nighthorn, and I think Slaves to Darkness. So it's the same as all of those factions. Why do you think people are playing Legion of the First Prince? Well, actually, as we've been talking about on the show for several months, Legion of the First Prince sees some particularly dominant play because it has the ability to shut down god monsters. And they're not going to feature as heavily anymore, so it'll be interesting to see if Legion of the First Prince falls off. But it has some really good tools into what the Age of Sigmar 3 initial 3.0 meta was. It still has some okay tools into the new edition, into 3.1, but a lot of the armies that we're going to see come out don't necessarily have a lot of those key pieces as much, and with the god characters getting FAQs in 3.1, I think you'll see LOFP fall off a little bit, basically. So we'll see. Okay, so the positive win rate potential. Okay, kits have probably picked up since the Ragnarok. That's true. I've forgotten about that. So let's see this. So as you can see here, Sons of Behemoth still have the highest for all of Age of Sigmar from 88 tournaments, so nearly 9,000 matches. Sons of Behemoth have got the highest positive win rate potential. Okay, so they're and that's just 4 Mega Gargants. You pick up 4 Mega Gargants, you push them forward, you stand on an objective, you're very likely to go 3-2. It's nearly 70%. Daughters of Cain, 67%. That'd be Marathi the Bow Snakes. Legion of the First Prince is 66%. And again, that's a very small group of select players playing them. Luminous Realm Lords, 65%. And Ceraphon 63%, and Disciples each 61%. Ironeth 56, Slaves to Darkness 55, and then Iron Jaws 52. So that gives Nergal, also, just throw that in there, Engrave Lords, I'm not avoiding them. That gives you all of the ones that have a positive win rate potential, right? So Soulblight, Nergal, Ironjaws, Slaves to Darkness, and Deepkin are all 51 to 56%. But then Tzeentch, up into Sons of Behemoth, is 61 to 68%. So that's really nice for those armies. Ceraphon have gone up to 69%. Yeah, right. Okay, so if we go to... if we now go up to the next slide, so that was over. This is over all of Age of Sigmar 3. Rob, if you're writing something out that I can't see on the screen, my brain will like be confused. If we look at Age of Sigmar 3.1, okay, again we'll ignore that big war stat at the top because it's aberrant. You can see. So this is over the past 8 tournaments. So the past 8 tournaments in just January. So this is a little bit harder to like track, but Daughters of Cain are at 81%, Cities of Sigmar at 79%, Ceraphon at 75%, Slaves to Darkness 75%, Stormcast at 65%. Okay, and then Sons of Behemoth at 64%. So this is currently looking at this is just January's results. Okay, but if we go and look at since the Ironjaws release and the Stormcast Eternals release, to give you an indication, Ceraphon, the counterpick, have gone up to 69%. They've become like the boogeyman of that particular period of time. Now, don't forget, there was a lot of Ceraphon play, and we saw a lot of Ceraphon play leading into... I actually don't think this is that helpful for this period of time, looking at it from the battletome releases, because while it's true, I don't think this is going to be indicative of the future. So this is really important. So we'll talk about this now, and we'll talk about the future, right? Because Ceraphon, yes, 69% positive win rate potential, highest up there. Daughters of Cain, 66. Disciples of Tzeentch, 66. Luminous, 64. And Sons, 64. Ironjaws, 58. Legion of the First Prince, 56. And then Stormcast and Deepkin are in the positive one there. I don't think this is particularly indicative of what we're going to see in the future, specifically because of the winter update. I think some of the things that Ceraphon played really, really well into, specifically Mega Gargants as well, are going to drop off in selection and choice and meta representation. So I think if we start to look at this, I think that you're very safe picking up. That Cities of Sigmar one, for me, is very telling. Very, very telling. 79%. It was not there previously. It's not great in depth. AOS3, right? Yes. The point that the reason I think that from Stormcast Eternals and Uruk Warclan's release isn't quite as indicative of what we're going to see, right? And this might be because what armies are going to be powerful and armies are going to have positive win rate potentials feels like. This is going to give us like a better indication, even though I know it's a smaller data set. It's only 8 tournaments, right? But it feels like it will give us that sort of indication and what you don't want to pick up, which is pretty important, truthfully. What do you think of Idoneth going into 3rd ed? Well, they're getting a new book, so I wouldn't be able to comment on that right now because the new book means you don't know anything. So sorry, first time chatter. But I would say that, like, if they keep Forgotten Nightmares, which is anti-shooting tech, I would say that they're in a very good place going into the next edition. Because Daughters of Cain up here, shooting army. Cities of Sigmar, shooting and combat army. Ceraphon is a shooting army, pretty much now, looking at the list that we're looking at. They generally tend to have Basiladons in there. Slaves to Darkness isn't a shooting army. I don't know what that result is from. That's from 40. That's really interesting. Stormcast Eternals at 65% positive win rate potential. Sons of Behemoth at 64. So again, these are from smaller data sets, so these will average out. These will average out, but if you look, pretty heavy here on the positive win rate potential. Okay. I find it really offensive to call DOK a shooting army. It's a shooting army, man. I don't know what to tell you. Right, okay. So we're going to come back to this maybe in a month or 2 months' time for the positive win rate potential. This is the one that really to me tells you that some armies are like crazy, because when we talk about win percentage, there's loads of factors, as is talked about by many people. There are loads of factors that affect that win percentage. Yeah, skill, player skill, terrain, battle plans, matchups, all sorts of things, right? When you start talking about, but when you have a large data set and you start talking about, okay, this army 70% of the time will have a positive win rate, feels like you're not asking much from the data set. You're just saying, how many times can I go 3-2? Yeah, like that's it, 3-2 or better. And if it's 70% of the time, it's an issue. Same way, if like kruleboyz, you can see at the bottom there, for this, so for like during the January data set, they can go, they have a positive win rate potential of 10%. Okay, so they're always going to turn out negative. So like when someone's new, they say to themselves, oh, I might pick up that new kruleboyz army. You're like, well, okay, well, you're probably going to go 2-3 events based on this very small data set than you are on something like if you were to pick, let's say, Ceraphon, where you go to 75%. But then it's not just any Ceraphon army, right? These are specific Ceraphon lists. The nice thing about tournaments, and there being pretty similar lists run by many people, is that there's not like tons of aberration in there as well. Like it's still the whole book. Okay. Okay. So that's positive win rate potential. I love that. I love that stat. It's always super fun. These are faction tournament outcomes. Okay. So this is how well, and this is really what puts them into either our top tier, our middle tier, or our bottom tier. So our sin tier, our fat middle, or our bin tier, basically, right? And the 5+ finish rate. But that's something I think we can come back and look at when we look at the factions in of themselves, basically. Then you've got faction win rate by opponent tier. Okay, so this is really important. Okay, this is a really good page, and I think has lots to talk about. So this particular page, if you're looking at it, what it does is it tells you how well an army does into the other tiers. So as we talked about before, top tier 55% above. Okay, well, my army, does it do well into the top tier or does it do well into the middle tier? Great question. Okay, so Ceraphon, as we know, has always been very, very good into the top tier. Yeah. And left column, yeah. Left column is how good you are into shooting. No, that's not true, right? Right column is how good you are into gits, basically. Right. So, like, and this is really good because this gives you some good indication about how your army will perform at a competitive tournament, as opposed to if you were going to play with your friends, which is kind of a good example. Like, you know, and then also it gives you some great, okay, what armies are in the top tier? Okay, these ones. Okay, my army's terrible into those. Okay, but don't have to worry about that because I'm actually, all my mates are all playing like middle tier armies. So like I'm in a really good place. Like that's fine. You're like, okay, great. That's really good. So this is a great stat, like really good. Ziggy created this. Like this is Ziggy's kind of like brainchild, and I think it's fantastic. So a big shout out to him. Okay, so if we look at this, for post the Stormcast and the Uruk Warclan book release, you'll see that Ceraphon, Disciples of Tzeentch, Sons of Behemoth are all, well, no, sorry. The only people that successfully play into the top tier are Ceraphon and Disciples of Tzeentch. Okay? Everyone else, like, doesn't do bad. The average, and again, it's lined up here, the average is 38% into the top tier. So you have a win rate of 38% into the top tier. Okay? However, so that's the average. That's the average. But if you want trying to get a positive win rate into the top tier, then Ceraphon and Tzeentch are your boys. Okay? So the Behemoth don't do bad into the top tier, neither do Deepkin or Ironjaws, but these are all on the losing end of the above average. Okay? Now, into the middle tier, Ceraphon do very well. Again, 64% outperforming everyone else. So they do great into the middle and top tier. What's fascinating is if you want to go and look at Ceraphon into the bottom tier, where are they even into the bottom tier? Where are they? They are below average into the bottom tier, right? So it really does indicate that, like, and also the bottom tier all generally tend to have like a very specific set of abilities. They generally tend to be horde armies. They generally tend to be low bravery, right? Shit army confirmed. Yeah, that's absolutely. So the Slaves of Darkness, not Slaves of Darkness, Ceraphon perform below average at 58% is the average. They perform 56% into the bottom tier, but they smash the middle tier, 64%, smash the top tier, 58%. They're the kings of playing later. So you just have to dodge round 1, and then you should start playing all of the good armies, basically. There we go. And again, so Legion of the First Prince, bit of a misnomer or a bit of a fib that actually Legion of the First Prince does really well into those top-end techie armies. Because actually Legion of the First Prince going into the top tier does quite well. It's 41% into the top tier. However, it does really, really well. Not as good as Ceraphon into the middle tier, 60%. Daughters of Cain do well into the middle tier. Luminous do well into the middle tier as well. Sons of Behemoth and Disciples each do into the middle tier as well. But the kings of beating up the bottom is the Idoneth Deepkin. They swim to the bottom. 76% into the bottom tier. Fire Slayers, 73% into the bottom tier. Disciples of Zinch, 71% into the bottom tier. Right? Fascinating stuff. Fascinating stuff. Now, that is all. Now, I'm going to now change this to just be January's results. And we're going to get some really fucky answers from the data set. Okay? So do not take much from this. Okay? So this is 3.1 so far. Okay? This is from 8 tournaments, 848 matches. Not enough data, I agree. But it gives us something. So, Ceraphon, 63% into the top. So they're still great into the top, as you can see. Ironjaw's still good into the top as well. Ironjaw's our new enter into the top at 55%, and Sons of Behemoth have just gone up into the top as well. So that's into the top tier of 3.1. Okay? Now, into the middle tier, Daughters of Cain dominate into the middle tier. Seeds of Sigmar dominate into the middle tier. Sons, Slaves, Ceraphon, Stormcast Eternals, Ironjaws all do really well into the middle tier. And then the people that beat up the bottom tier, Dragons, Dragon Supremacy, Long Strike Supremacy, is Stormcast, 75% into the bottom tier, with Maggotkin of Nergal being the average into the bottom tier. So the bottom tier really struggling with Maggotkin and Nergal, and then losing pretty massively. And as we know, if we went back, the bottom tier is pretty big at the moment. But this data set isn't big enough really to be drawing any conclusions yet, apart from just seeing that Ceraphon is still doing pretty well. Okay, so I would so if you're sad by this, like I see someone in the chat is just saying, I'm sad. This isn't complete. Yeah, this particular set isn't complete. The set that you really want to look at is the whole of Age of Sigmar. Okay, at the moment, because the Winter FAQ really didn't do that much. Okay, so there we go. But this is a great set of data, so I love this. Okay, so this is the T-Whip. The fucking T-Whip. Okay, so shout out to the 40kstats.com. Right, so this is your tournament in winning position, effectively. Right, so this is when your first loss happened, and then and so this the suggestion with this data set is that the further you go into a tournament, the more valuable your wins are. Okay, so if you take your first loss in the 5th round, your army is better than if you take your first loss in the 1st round, and then you have 4, insert brackets, easy matchups over the next 4 rounds. Okay, that's the assumption. The assumption is it's harder. This is an Americanized data set because they quite often will play 8-round tournaments. So for them, it makes more sense that losing on your 7th round wasn't is far more important as a piece of data than losing on your 1st round. So you could both go 7-1 in that event, but you lost on the 8th round and you lost on the 1st round. So that becomes more relevant in the data sets there. So that's your T-Whip, basically. I'm not 100% certain how to interpret this data for Age of Sigmar, basically. We should have a serious conversation about what metrics are the most useful. Leo, I agree, but that's why we've presented lots of different data metrics here, right? Yeah, there's lots of data sets here for you to draw your own conclusions from, and some of them I don't find as helpful as other people find. So that's what's really interesting. So there's your T-Whip page. It's also a view of how likely you are to go 5-0. It needs to get the 4-0 to make that happen. That's also true as well. So if we break this down to post the Stormcast and the Maggotkin of Nergal book, the army that's most likely, wait, score, is it? Yes, the army with the best T-whip ratio, so tournament in winning position, is Legion of the First Prince at 2.8. Then it's Ceraphon at 2.5. Disciples of Tzeentch at 2.5, and then Big War at 2.3. So these are your armies that are most likely to get you further into the tournament before you take your first loss, basically. And the ratio is getting into that position versus your meta rep. Yes. So that's how you do it. So it's this times this to get into this, basically. I don't overly find it super useful. But it's there for everyone. I think it's a dead horse and people just accepted Ceraphon. Yeah. I mean, they've been strong since book release, right? Like, crazy numbers. Now, on to some good shit. This is your faction win rate over time. Your faction win rate over time is hot stuff. Hot stuff. Okay? And as you can see, there's some data sets here. So ogres, as you can see, have been getting progressively worse over the course of this edition of Age of Sigmar. From July to Jan, they're at their lowest point in January at 3.9%, which is pretty rough. And then representation has stayed about the same. Basically. Love this slide, yeah. But I like this. I like this one a lot. Okay, so let's look at some of the armies, because Ceraphon is the one that we've been talking about a lot in this particular set of data, because they've been standing out. And as you can see, their meta representation has kind of like, it peaked around the Stormcast Eternals book, or like October and November, December became, November and December, it was particularly popular. And when it was very popular in December, it also had its best win rate over that month. Okay, so December, we had it at 9.3% of the meta, and it had 63% win rate. And then in January, it went down to 6.2%, so a big 3% drop, and it dropped down to a 56% win rate there. So it's quite interesting. Like, are the dinos going to continue to be good? It's a great question. Mortal wound shooting may be, those long strikes may really put a lot of pressure on the army, potentially. Also, the shooting coming out of dragons and fulminators could also be an issue for the army as well. We will see, because it doesn't get to reduce the damage from mortals down. It does get to reduce the damage down from Iron Jaws and also Gargants as well. It'll be very interesting to see how that does. For our new books, it's worth looking at our new books, Maggotkin of Nergal, our meta representation in December was 0.9%, so no one was playing them. But then in January, we got our new book, and it's shot up. It shot up from 0.9% to 5.3%, okay? And our win rate is the same. It's a 49% win rate in January so far, which is great. It's good. It's exactly in the fat middle. Nergal are going to love that. They're super happy with that. You know, people are doing well with them. People are also not doing well with them. So they're in the 49% win rate bracket. They're fine. They're medium. They're doing a little bit better than I thought that they would do, truth be told. I thought that they would sit more 45% than 50%. So I'm quite surprised, but I'm also not surprised. There's been some long-time Nergal fans who have loved Nergal for a long time. Take example recently, #SlotMachineKiller has been playing Nergal a long time and took out an event recently. We also had a lot of event results from this weekend where Nergal did surprisingly well. Is there a way for Stormcast to shoot in the hero phase? Yes, there is a way. Let's not forget the White Dwarf update for coming Beast of Chaos, yes. So interesting to see meta representation higher, but win rate not any higher on the new book. So I'd be very interested to see how this ends up going over the next. Okay, Ziggy, thank you. With that win rate might go up, though. That 49% win rate for Nergal may go up, because I'm just hearing that we're still waiting on some event results to go in, basically. So that might go up. That might go up. That January result might actually go up. So if it does tend to go up, then that would actually be really surprising. Really surprising if that ends up going like close to 55. I'd be genuinely amazed, by that result. So there you go. So what are our new books? What are our other new books? We obviously want to look at Stormcast Eternals. Okay, there we go. Now, obviously, since the launch of the new book, they were at a meta representation of 6.7%. Then the new, before the new book, they were 5.3%. New book, 6.7%. Then the FAQ, 7.8%. And then 15%. So just track that again. October, where they were at a 6% of the meta. Then they were 9% of the meta for November and December. And now they've shot up to 15% of the meta. And with that, has their win rate gone up? October from 45. October and November, they were 44 and 45%. December, we got a 52. And January, their best result yet. 58% win rate in January so far. Yeah. So it looks like Stormcast stonks through the roof. They're going through to the moon. Will they go any higher? Will people know how to deal with the Stormcast? Will people actually playing Stormcast move over to cities? Because actually that's the thing I would like to look at next. When you talk about Stormcast, you need to also talk about cities of Sigmar. Where are they? Where are they? Cities of Sigmar. There we go. So, cities of Sigmar. Excellent. Cities of Sigmar have had a pretty stable run, both in meta representation and also win rate until January. Okay, with the inclusion of Fulminators and Dragons. They've pretty much, as an army, been 4.5% of the meta, pretty much 4.5% of the meta, and their win rate has been pretty much 45 to 47% win rate. January, we have shot up to 65% as a win rate, right? Those cities armies are all actually full Dawn armies, right? They're close. People have traded in their Iron Drakes for 4 Fulminators to put into their living city lists, and they're having a great time. They're having a really good time. All their dragons in that list as well. But this is what we're seeing. We're seeing this. This isn't cities have found a new way to play. There was no FAQ for cities. We had no points changes for cities. We got nothing that went cheaper. Oh, that's not true. The Free Guild General on Griffin did get cheaper. So it could be that. It could be that. But I don't think it is, truthfully. I don't think that's the case. I think what we're seeing here is a lot of win rates. We also had some unique lists do particularly well. At LVO, we had the Phoenicium list do really, really well. So there we go. What about the 3 guys with 3 assassins and 2 phoenixes? Just mentioned him, baby. He's also in there as well. So unsurprising to see that tick up. And I wouldn't be surprised if that maintains or at least has doesn't have a particularly sharp drop-off. It won't have a sharp drop-off as much as it has an uptick. So from 47 to 65%, I wouldn't be surprised to see if that settles down towards 60. But it's still very high and too high. It must have been the White Dwarf, yeah. Now, Ironjaws. They're one of our newer armies, and they're worth looking at here. Ironjaws have done pretty well since their book, pre their book release. They were at 4.2% of the meta. Then once they got their FAQ, they went up to 8% of the meta, and they've kind of maintained that. In January, they've dropped to 8%, and in December, they had the highest at 9% of the meta. Their win rate has been genuinely pretty okay. 52%. A lot of complaints about Ironjaws, I know, but their win rate sits in what is the fine category, the fat middle. December, it's 52%. In January, it was 53%. Interestingly, they've gone up a percentage point, even though they had a points hike in the winter FAQ. So they went up a little bit. See that stabbing it? There's a chance where the cities can take too much Stormcast, or is the problem just Stormcast at that point? I would say that it's you get a lot more rules overlay from cities onto Stormcast units than you do from the Stormcast book. Okay. So yeah, this is pretty interesting. Again, Ironjaws are fine. 52%, 53%. They're in the fine category. I have no problems. They've got a good, healthy meta representation. They're 8% of the meta. There's lots of people playing them. That might mean that there's lots of people who aren't overly great with the army playing with them. And it might be a much stronger book if it had just a very select player base playing with them. But ultimately, they're in a really good spot. 53% win rate. They're fine. Okay. Okay. Now, kruleboyz. It's a kruleboyz summer, baby. A page to see after this is one called Meta. Okay, thank you, Ziggy. If you could write an explanation in the chat for me, would be great. So the faction win rate over time, okay, for the kruleboyz, looking pretty grim. If you are a shadow shooter, if you love the swamp, if you've been into boggling nothing but swampy folk for most of your life, the faction win rate over time is magnificent models. Yes, magnificent models, but not the best win rate. They've been about 3% of the meta since release. About 3% of the meta. They continue to be about 3% of the meta. However, their win rate has peaked in November up to 48% win rate when they had their highest meta representation of 5. But then December, they went down to 34% win rate, and January, they're in a 37% win rate. This is way below our 45% safe bracket. There aren't many units inside that book. There aren't many ways to play that army. They don't even have something that makes them very different Iron Jaws, where you could be Bloodtooths or Iron Sons. They really don't have that play or that room inside of their own book to see play. Obviously, we did see a Kragnos Gobsprak list do particularly well over the weekend, go 4-1. But even that is going to struggle to bring them up in the numbers. That's true. Kruleboyz Summer was supposed to be last summer a tragedy. I agree. So that didn't happen. So Kruleboyz not in the best place and continue to not be in the best place. They've never been a good place since release, and it's not looking like it's getting any better, basically. Okay, so don't forget, they also released, and you guys might laugh at me, they also released Big War in this time. And I don't know if Dave Fraser was in the chat, but their representation has been very low. Very low. And some would say that these are aberrant numbers, but they've got a 70% win rate. Yeah? Okay, 0.6%, 70% win rate. Is Big War, okay, is Big War the Legion of the First Prince of Uruks? That's the question I'll leave you on. Leave comments in the chat below. That's the one I want. What is the Big War list, as they all say? And then the final one to look at, obviously, is our Bone Splitters. Okay? They're having a a tougher time, is all I'm going to say. Their best performance was in December, where they actually managed to get a 40% win rate. They are 0.8% of the meta, so less than 1%. January, they had their very worst performance of 27%. Okay, so not the best, basically, but they're also meta representation is very low, and it's a super low data set. Maybe if Richard Siegler was playing them, he would be able to make them do really well. So those are the faction win rates over time. Okay, pretty good. Magakin and Nergal, we looked at them already. All right, good. So those are all of our new books. Luminous, fun to see them, and fun to see that downward spiral. As you can see, they dropped from 59% to 51% in December, between November and December, and it would be those 60 points that they changed between December and January, which ruined the army. Ruined it. Basically made it unplayable, because they were only playable when they could have Sentinels that are 60 points cheaper, and now they are unplayable. For our first time chatter in the chat, Nergal are doing fine. Nergal are doing better than fine, actually. Nergal are doing really well. There we go. They have lost a third of their players. I guess that's the point to point out. Thank you very much, Rob. They have lost a third of their players. Don't forget they were one of the most popular factions previously, and they have started to lose. They've started to literally just shed players. More and more people just not playing this army, so probably playing with others as well. They are unplayable in the meta at the minute, it says Elf Strategy Just. Yeah, they're unplayable in the meta. They are an unplayable army. I don't even know why people play them. 60 points has been added on, and they are probably... I'd probably throw them all away. That's probably what I'd do. 0 tools. They've got 0 tools. They've got 0 units that can do anything. That 60 points has ruined the entire army, basically. And the stats support that, which is nice. Throw them away in my mailbox. So this is something that just got asked for by Twitter. This is the faction versus faction win rate. So I'm going to skip that. And I'm also going to skip faction versus faction frequency. Feel free to look at those to your heart's content. I mean, I run a more melee heavy Luminous and it's fun. So Stephen Mack, your army is ruined. I don't think you know how that works. Like they're absolute rubbish. So shout out to has this been updated, Ziggy? Or this is the one thing I don't know if this particular page. This is unit frequency. How commonly we see units in the game right now, but I don't think this has been updated for 3.1, not for January. Okay, well, we'll skip this because this is the same as last time, basically. So we'll so this will be updated at some point, or it might not be updated because that's actually a harder one to do. Now we're on to the I feel sorry for the folk that don't get your humour. There's someone at home with his Luminous army like, what? It's been ruined! It was, of course, just for everyone to know, a joke. It was a haughty little joke is what I was doing. So I'm sorry. I'm sorry for the joke. Do the 2 graph page if it's over the 2 graph page. Which page number, Ziggy? Are you talking about? Rob, jokes have been ruined. I agree. I get it. Good. I know you all get it. Like. Honest Wargamer says Luminous now bottom army. They are a bottom tier army. They are a bottom tier army. Which page are you asking me to look at, Ziggy, in the chat? Is it this one? The graphs. Okay. So a faction review for tournaments 17. 17. Not this one. Oh. Percentage of all faction entries by month. Oh, no. Sorry, bud. If you don't prep me to tell me what I'm looking at, I'm just looking at colours. So, like, I don't know what to tell you. Like, because everyone knows it was a standard shoot reaction nerf that ruined them, not the 60 points. It's true. It's true. It's true. It's true. Yeah, this is one of those. This is one of those. That's too many fucking numbers for me. It's the same. You've just been looking at it, but you can't compare factions at a glance. It's the same percentage of all faction entries by month. Okay. All right. So the page we're looking at now, which is page 17, if you're following along at home, or if you are listening to this as a podcast, it won't make as much sense. It will show you the meta representation of different armies in here. And it shows you the dominance of Stormcast Eternals now make up 16% of that meta and how much of the pie they have started to slice and carve for themselves in this here. But the percentage of all 4+ wins, which is the other slide on the far right-hand side, right, is the percentage of all 4+ wins by month. And if you look in December, Stormcast Eternals were at 8%. They weren't the most popular. That would have been Ceraphon, 19% of 4+1 finishes. But now, going into January, which is our new data set, which is the big takeaway, 28%. 28% of 4+1 finishes. Okay, so 28% of all 4-1 finishes are Stormcast Eternals. Okay. So they're doing very, very well, even though their win percentage says whatever it might be. Like they're placing quite well at the end of a day into that 4-1 bracket, and that's quite telling. I mean, like if you look at them, like compared to Sons of Behemoth at 5%, who at one point Sons of Behemoth were 16% of those 4-1 finishes in August, but they're now up to 28%, and Cities of Sigmar also went from 4%, thank you very much, up to 11%. Okay, so same thing as we saw previously. If I remember correctly, you said this would happen when Stormcast Battletome dropped. Yes. Like, this is always going to be the case. It really depends on what the book is, right? Like, so with Nergal, I don't expect this to happen with Nergal, right? Because I don't expect the popularity of Nergal to be this high, that they will have this many end-up results. But I do expect based on, like, and as a surprise to me, I do expect Nergal to do better than like they were ticketed to perform, and they might sit around like a 50 to 55% win rate overall, which is actually fairly surprising to me. Who are they eating to gain that much ground? Who are they eating into? So they're eating into loads of different armies. What you're actually seeing more than anything is seeing a bunch of players move. So like when it's a tool conversation, right? So like I'm going into war, and like there's a table in front of me, and you know there's a spoon and there's a knife. So I pick up the knife, and the knife previously was LRL and Sons of Behemoth and a couple of other armies, DOK and some other stuff, right? So I pick up the knife and I run forward, and I get to the next checkpoint, right? And then they're like, okay, you can keep the knife, or here's a new gun. And you think, okay, I'm going to take the gun. So what you're really seeing, like you've seen with meta representation, is you've seen players moving away from their knife armies to their new gun armies, right? And so that's what you're seeing. It's not that it's the same player base doing better. You're seeing the competitive players who understand how to build good armies and what armies are strong, moving between armies and gaining ground. And that's obviously true also in the percentage representation as well. Okay. As an example would be the Luminous Realm Lords, which are a terrible army now, absolutely terrible, completely unplayable. At 1%, at one point were 7% of the meta. So that was in November, and they had 10% of the 4-1 finishes. Like they were doing really well, but they're still 4% of the meta. Like they haven't changed. Like in representation. Oh no, they've gone down 3%. Okay, so they're almost half. They're almost half the representation. Yeah, and now and they've got no 4-1 finishes. No 4-1 finishes in January. Okay, so all of the players who were using them well have jumped ship to another army. Okay. So like people like Slotty in the chat who did really well recently with a 5-0 Nergal list. He's always played Nergal. So he represents them. So what you're actually seeing is players move like to better and or different factions and stronger factions, if that makes sense. I'm here happily grinding my knife into a spoon. Yeah, there you go. So that hopefully answers some of those questions. What's really impressive, obviously, is the rise of the Stormcast and Cities of Sigmar in these particular matches. Man, people don't know how to try new things, which goes back to your original comment way earlier. It does, Stephen Mac. But also, and most importantly, people should be allowed to go and play with the new toys. If you get given the ability to move in a hero phase and then shoot and then move again, you're going to take it. That's a great new tool to be able to play with. That's a fun toy to use at a tournament. Okay, like there's no way. It's big numbers all the time. When you get your new WoW expansion and they say you can go up to level 120, you're like, oh shit, I've got like the big numbers. Yeah, when you can do big numbers and you get a new book that says you've got new big numbers, you go and buy big numbers. You go buy the army, play the army because you're doing big numbers. It's super fun. It feels mad. Being able to do, like we saw at the finals coverage at the weekend, we saw 45 damage going into a Mega Garg, and you're like, yes, that's what I want to see. Like move at the end of your opponent's shooting phase. Yeah, we saw that come into play and be used loads during the last edition. I think Nergal's a good book. It's more obvious what's good in Stormcast Eternals. Says Age of something. Yeah, I agree. And taking their wins and finishes with them, are there plans on how to normalize? Are there plans how to normalize this state? I don't know what that means, but I'm sorry. Okay, so great little chart here. Thanks, Iggy. Very colourful. A little overwhelming in my opinion for me. But like it's a good one shot of looking at all the information, which is great. Okay, let's go back. I really like this page. This is a great page. So this is page 15 if you're following along at home. This is a faction review for different armies, right? And this gives you some kind of like tournament data, which isn't just like about the unit data. So I think we might end this. And don't forget that all of the lists are available also in pages 18 and 19 for you guys to check it out, or 18 if you want to. We're just going to end this section after talking about this, and then we'll go and do each one of the factions as a deep dive, which we'll do tomorrow, right? Because that's going to be another 2 hours. It took me 2 hours last time. Okay, so like move the independent shooting phase, yeah. Right, so Stormcast Eternals. Okay, this is the army to talk about, right? And then battletome releases. So we're going to go post the FAQ, right? For Stormcast Eternals with Maggotkin as well. Ziggy, no one gets it yet, baby. Right, so Stormcast Eternals. Okay, so there's some really good stuff in here. This is like a really good snapshot of a load of different things. So what's their win rate post the Stormcast book? This doesn't allow me to just choose January, does it? No. Okay, so this is just post the release of their books and their FAQ, right? So they've got a 51% win rate, which does seem fine, yeah. But that is gonna, as we have seen, January is pushing this on the uptick, and in 3.1. Going forward, I would say this is going to be particularly strong. Yeah, just let Maggotkin and Nergal. Oh, thanks, Iggy. Okay, right. So post the Maggotkin and Nergal book release, okay, for Stormcast Eternals, they're on a 58% win rate. Okay, that's from 52 tournament results, right, from 267 matches. So they they most often lose to themselves. Right, so their first round loss, so their first lost opponent, or the opponent they lose to most, love this information, is themselves. They cannibalize their own stats pretty significantly over on the right-hand side. And it's skewed by the first army factor, it is, of course. So they lose to themselves first most. Then they lose to Cities of Sigmar, which have got Stormcast in it, second most. And then third, they lose to Maggotkin of Nergal. I too am my own worst enemy. Damn you, Stormcast! Damn you to hell! However, that's really important data. That's really interesting. Why do they lose themselves? Because there's loads of them out there. Why do they lose to Cities? Because they're Stormcast but better. I would say that Cities is a better Stormcast list than the Stormcast list, in my opinion. Why did they lose to Maggotkin and Nergal? Nergal's able to dish out some pretty good mortal wound output into a high armor save, low healing army that's very elite in the Stormcast version of this. LLV in the chat, the original stats guru, throw an observation I noticed in the past: the more a faction is represented, the more their win rate is normalized. If a faction has the best win percentage and they're played by a swath of players, it indicates they're very strong. I agree with LLV a lot, which is why I tried to talk about this a lot. When you have high meta representation and a high win rate, that means that army is very, very, very good. Very good. Which is what the positive win rate potential represents the most, I think, in my opinion. Because it takes all of the data, doesn't matter about the results, and just goes, you just need to go 3-2, right? And if someone's got like an 70% positive win rate potential, I'm like, you are a problem army, because players of varieties of skills are just face rolling their way to victory there. Okay, so other stuff to look at on this particular chart, which is quite interesting. So they lose to themselves the most. Okay, they have a 4-0 rate of 11%. So 11% of the time they go 4-0 before they take a loss, which isn't terrible, I guess. But then we're looking at the average, as you can see here. The average is, so on the far right hand side is the tournament finishes. Sorry, far left hand side are tournament finishes. Okay, and then you have the average that all factions achieve, and then the current faction is able to achieve. So as an example, able to only finish on having one win is the average is 15%. So 15% as an average for an army. So all factions to have just one win and 4 losses. Okay, for Stormcast Eternals, that's low. That's actually 12%. They're below average. They're also below average on 2 wins, right? Which is 30% on average. Armies on average have a 30% 2-win rate and then a 31% for 3-win rate, which makes sense, right? Most of the armies will fit into that category there. But again, Stormcast are below average there. They're 19%. Now, on 3 wins, they have a 31% result for getting 3 wins, which is the average, right? That's the average. So for getting 3 wins, and 2 losses an event. However, for 4 wins, the game average, or sorry, the factions average is 16%. So 16% get four wins and 1 loss. I'm really struggling to know how to exactly describe this, so I'm hoping I'm doing a good job. However, Stormcast, 23% in that. Yeah, LLV, you're absolutely correct. It would have been. So Stormcast have 4 wins. So the average again is 16%, and then Stormcast have a 23% going into the 4-win category. So that's 4 wins and 1 loss. And then in 5 wins, right? Very few armies are able to get 5 wins. Only 4% of all factions get 5 wins, or 4% of all results for factions get 5 wins. But for Stormcast, triple that, 12%. 12%. So you triple that for Stormcast, right? Now, I also like the first loss round because this is really nice. We'll compare this to a not particularly good army right now. It shifted a bell curve away from normal towards more wins. It has. The interesting thing is the round of first loss. Yeah, when they lose their first game. Okay. And then there's the average, and then there's the current faction. Okay, so when they lose their first game. Okay, so we'll compare them in a minute. Okay, so we'll compare them to an army that's not doing well, that needs an update. Okay, so all factions, 49% of the time, they lose their first round. Okay, that's obviously equating for draws in there as well. You would think it would be 50-50, but obviously there's draws and stuff. And then for Stormcast, it's 40. Right, round 2, all factions is 24, Stormcast is 21. And then Stormcast start to lose more than the average round 3, 4, and then 5. Okay? The guy on the Stormcast Eternals group who said Stormcast unperformed LVO, insightful, or high on meth. High on meth, if that helps you out. So that's Maggot King and Nergal. Okay? Not Maggot King and Nergal, sorry, that's Stormcast Eternals. We're now going to compare them to a not good army. That's a Slanesh. Right, let's just do that. And then that will give you some indication of how cooked those stats are. To give you some indication. And see those numbers turn around. We don't have enough data for that. Okay, not those guys then. Give me lots of players but didn't do very well. Gits. Okay. It's a bit better. So round 1, as we saw, Stormcast Eternals only had like a 40% chance of losing their first round. Gits have a 60%, like a 60% chance of losing their first turn. And if we take it off, so it's just all of the data, right? It's because Gits have obviously had no updates other than Arachnorot's getting a bit cheaper. The chance that Gloomspite Gits are going to lose their first round, the average obviously is 49%, but for Gloomspite Gits, it's 72%. They almost always lose their first round. Right, which is pretty wild. Yeah. They almost, not almost always, 72%. 3/4 of the time, they lose their first round, which is pretty nuts. Their first round is often to Daughters of Cain, then Sons of Behemoth, then Ironjaws, then Stormcast, then Disciples of the Ancient Cities of Sigmar. Gits lose the game 6% of the first turn. 72% really is what the actual data is saying. And if we talk about Hedonites of Slanesh, which also needs some love, because it is important to talk about the guys that are also not doing well, because we want them to do well. So they're doing a bit better than Gits. They lose their first round 66% of the time. Okay, which is pretty wild, truthfully. Right, what's the next faction if you want to be opposed and take an unpopular faction, but you also like winning? It would be take Cragbro, and also Gobsprak and some Bolt Boys, and 20 Hobgrots, right? I think if you take 10 points off shooters, they will be meta. I agree. If we just if we just take 10 points, I think if you just take 10 points off Gits shooters, probably going to see that change by 30 or 40%, right? But that's not a guarantee. That's not like a full guarantee, but I'm roughly guessing. Now, there's lots to break down on this particular page as well, but that's a good like meta snapshot, right? That'll do. And then tomorrow on Twitch, we will go through all of we'll go for the faction by faction stuff, right? Which will be like more like an in-depth dive into each individual faction. I think that'll be good. That gives us a good overview and a snapshot of the stats as a wholesale for the whole meta right now, and post, and then we'll do the whole deep dive for each faction, sub-factions, because we have the ability to look at the sub-factions, which sub-factions are being taken most, which armies they play well into, what their battalion usage is going to be like, and I think that's going to take like a considerable amount of time, because I'd like to do a really good job on that, so we'll do that tomorrow. So if you have been listening to this live on Twitch, thanks for listening. If you've been watching this back as a podcast, love you loads, and if you've been watching this back on YouTube, loads of love to you. Thanks to everyone on the Honest Wargamer Patreon for supporting the show. It's the easiest and best way to support us. Big love to you, and thanks for tuning in.